Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Steel News Podcast, Episode 3. I'm Brendan McGrevy here with the Steel News alongside Braeden with Bengals underscore NFL and Jay with Steelers Loyalty. Guys, the Steelers coming off a big win against the Seattle Seahawks, fighting for the 7th seed in the AFC, coming off a big win, 30-23. Jay, what did you see from the Steelers running game and Mason Rudolph?
What I saw was a dominating run game that that has really found their stride, and the offense has really found a groove, I think, with Mason Rudolph. Um, whether people believe it or not, I mean, you put him in trying to get a spark, and it looks like they got the spark they were looking for now. So that's why I think now they're looking to move forward with Rudolph for
Yeah, it's
indefinitely for this season.
Yeah, and it seems like Rudolph just seems to be that guy. Now, Braden, what did you see from, Rudolph? Have you been impressed by him yourself, or are you still thinking that Kenny's the long-term guy?
I think from what Mason's shown, I think he should be the guy, whether if it's next year or into the playoffs. It's he's made a spark, kind of like Jay said, for the Steelers. He's throwing for multiple touchdowns, something Kenny Pickett has been struggling to do. I think just his few performances has been very telling of what Kenny Pickett is to the Steelers. So I'm not sure I'm buying long-term option, but I think Mason Rudolph is the best quarterback currently in the Steelers quarterback room.
Yeah, I agree. And, the Steelers, they're going with their hot hand. I've seen stuff all over social media, saying right now Mason is who they should go with, but in the long term, they should go back with Kenny because he hasn't had that much time without Matt Canada due to injuries, and taking that long to fire him. But Uh, what have you guys thought about the Steelers' offensive line? Because I remember they used to be a low point of this team, but these past few weeks they've looked like they've shaped up pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I think offensive lines looked great. Broderick Jones, I think that was a great pick. I mean, he's been great for a first round pick.
Oh yeah,
Um, yeah,
Yeah, I've I've definitely been impressed, especially when they kicked the Bengals' butt, when I had a really good look at it. And I think a big part of it is that Matt Canada's there. I thought he didn't scheme well the player strengths. And while the scheme is still similar to Matt Canada, because it's obviously very challenging to just put a new offense in 75% into the season, but I think the offensive line's being put into a better position, just kind of emphasizing that it wasn't necessarily a talent issue earlier in the season. It was the scheme, and now that they're being put in a better situation, they're going to perform better as we have seen. So I think this isn't an accident. I think we'll continue to see the Steelers' offensive line perform, maybe not elite, but perform a lot better than what we have seen.
yeah. And another vocal point I want to make about this Steelers team is, George Pickens had 7 catches for 131 yards. No receiving touchdowns this week, but last week, against the Cincinnati Bengals, he went off back-to-back big weeks for George Pickens. And I think again, opening up the running game for the Steelers offense leaves George Pickens and Mason Rudolph with so many options because if the defense is expecting a run, you can do a quick audible and get your deep threat with George Pickens. It opens up a lot for this team. And you guys think the Steelers should keep giving GP the ball? And, what do you guys think about all that?
Yeah, I think they should absolutely try and keep getting him involved. For GP, it was never a talent issue; it was a character issue. But there was talk of him going in the first round in last year's draft, and from a talent standpoint, that is very hard to argue. And we are now seeing why he is a very explosive receiver. He can get open, as you said. He opens up that run game when he is getting involved. Because he is a big reason why the Steelers' offense, as of late, has found so much success. And I don't think that's an action. I think they keep getting him involved, make the defense respect him, maybe put a safety over top, double team him. I think that's going to keep this offense wide open, keep giving them a variety of plays and keeping the defense on their feet.
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
Jay, you want to
It
add
seems
something?
like it seems like he has some serious chemistry with Rudolph right now. where Rudolph just knows to just throw it up to him.
Yeah, and it seems like most of the time when he throws it up, George Pickens is the one that comes down with it when you trust him.
Yeah, a big part of quarterback receiver connection is trusting your receivers. Sometimes you got to throw up the long ball, even if they're perfectly covered, trusting that they can come down. Obviously, that's not going to be 100% success, but sometimes just throwing it up, letting your receiver make a play is the best decision to make during a play.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. And another thing I do want to mention is shout out to Chris Boswell. He was 3 for 3 on field goals again this week. I know he had a season or two where he really struggled and Steelers fans were booing, but this guy's a stud. He's not the best kicker in the league, but he's definitely up there as one of the best, not the best, but one of the best. But I also want to shout out to the Steelers Pro Bowlers, T.J. Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick, Miles Killebrew. I was kind of a little surprised about Minka just because he's been out for a little while, but he is the best safety in football when he's in the game. T.J. Watt, no surprise, best defensive player, one of the best defensive players in football. Especially is the reason the Steelers are even still in contention right now. And Miles Killebrew stepped up big time for that special teams. You guys have any thoughts on these Pro Bowl selections for Pittsburgh?
I don't have any disagreements. Yeah, Minka being hurt, I was a tad surprised too, but I think he's earned the benefit of the doubt with his consistency of being one of the best safeties in the NFL. I'll admit I did zero Pro Bowl voting this year, but I still would have voted for him at safety because, like I just said, he is one of the best safeties in the NFL, and him being injured doesn't change that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think I agree with them. Um, George Pickens, I think, might have been able to if he was able to find this type of groove earlier in the season. But
Yeah.
yeah, for now, these selections, I agree with them.
Yeah, and it's tough too because if the Steelers switched to Rudolph earlier when Kenny went down, they could have been locked in the playoffs right now or like had a been in right now, but there's no what if, ands or buts, we're play with the cards we're dealt and Steelers just on the cusp of the playoffs, but I've also been really impressed with Nick Herbig. They had a really good strip sack and he looks really good, Wisconsin player. TJ Watt's got to be proud seeing his play, and he had a big time play. And also, I want to shout out Joey Porter Jr. for having that big time play on DK Metcalf to shut down the Seahawks offense when they were in the red zone scoring. This Steelers, they're a young team, but they have that veteran presence with Patrick Peterson and Eric Rowe. From the practice squad, former Patriot. I really like that signing, and I've also been really impressed with Miles Jack coming back too out of retirement. Was a big tall task for him, but he showed up, and this Steelers team, they find ways to win. They just find studs in the free agency and the draft with defensive players, which tends to happen. But
Yeah, they've definitely had some guys step up on defense, I think. Like so many guys went down. We were so thin at safety. Minka was gone. Casey suspended. Trent Thompson. So and the inside linebacker as well. They lost Landon Roberts and then Holcomb and Quan Alexander. So they definitely needed the guys to step up.
yeah, and that's. Oh, go ahead, Braden.
Now, as much it pains me to do it as a Bengals fan, I think your front office deserves a lot of credit. It shows you guys scouting has been a strong suit for you guys because in order for teams to find success, as much as important it is to draft rounds 1, 2, and 3 or sign the backup or the practice squad player on your team, it's just as important to find that talent because you find if you being able to find success in the playoffs, being a legitimate threat, that's just what you have to be able to do. And that's what you guys have been able to do. And that's why, even if it took a little later, you have been able to find success this part of the season. It's because you guys have been able to be so great at scouting.
Yeah, a big part of it is the con artist, as they call him. He's done some great things for the Steelers organization. Kevin Colbert was a big time guy for the Steelers, getting them some studs in the draft, in free agency and all that. But the con artist comes in, he makes some big moves, and that I was a little scared at first, losing Kevin Colbert as GM, but Omar stepped up big time, and I've been very, very impressed with him. But switching topics now. going for the Steelers, their playoff chances. There's a lot for them that has to go for them to get in. I mean, it's not too complicated, but there are a few things. Obviously, the Steelers have to win. There is a scenario where they lose, but it's better if they win. And their winning scenarios are they have to win and the Colts and Texans tie. They win and Buffalo loses, they lose, or the Jaguars lose or tie, or the Steelers tie and the Colts and Texans do not tie and the Jaguars lose, or if the Steelers lose and the Colts and Texans do not tie and the Jaguars lose and the Broncos win. Guys, that's a mouthful. What are your percent chances the Steelers are making the playoffs here?
Ooh, freezing me up. I
I put it around 50-50, I think. I mean, they've got the Ravens backups, and then Dolphins and Bills. I mean, that's pretty much a toss up, I think. And then you got the Jags too, which I mean, any given Sunday, anything can happen. So you just need one of the two to go your way.
Yeah, and I think it's possible, especially with I mean the Dolphins. I feel like have a better chance, even though Bradley Chubb did go down for the season. The Dolphins are still a really good team, even though the Bills are heating up. Um, but I think the Titans. It's a tall task to ask of them, but if the Titans could pull out a win for us, that'd be huge.
I'll agree with the 50-50. Yeah, this has been a really weird NFL season. Any of those, it's not unrealistic to think that it will happen. Those are all very much possible, and a few of those they should go in the Steelers' favor just from the pre-game's look. So I think it's 50-50. I think it's well within reach for the Steelers, and I think the Steelers will definitely take care of business on their part and what they need to do to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, and another crazy thing about this AFC playoff picture is there were so many teams that were in down to the wire within the last couple of weeks. Now the teams, in the hunt or in the bubble, the Texans at the 8th seed and the Steelers at the 9th seed, just outside. But you look at the Bills, and the Bills, they could be the 2nd seed or they can be out of the playoffs, which is something else that's crazy to think of. You can either be, home field advantage, like the 2nd seed used to get a first round bye before they added the 7th seed playoff format for both or conferences. But it'll be interesting to see, if the Steelers do get in, they'll most likely be the 7th or the 6th seed, so that we'll be looking at playing like the Chiefs or the Dolphins. I don't know if there's a scenario where we play the Bills or not. I think there is if the Jags lose, but do you guys think they have a chance to be either one of those teams if they make the playoffs?
The Dolphins, I think you guys can absolutely beat them. Great defense to certainly struggles within those regards. And if Tyreek and or Waddle is still injured, we've seen how he struggles in that offense. So I think against the Dolphins, I would even for an official pick, I may even say you got would probably pick the Steelers. The team like KC, that's very challenging to predict because unlike many other teams, they have been super inconsistent. There have been times where they've lived up to the talent on that team, and when they do, they almost look unstoppable. But that they've been super inconsistent with that. I would probably pick the Chiefs, but if somebody said they would pick the Steelers in that, it would be hard to argue just because we wouldn't know what KC team we're getting if it's on the poor side. And if Rudolph has a good game, not even being special, they're just consistent. I think the Steelers would win in that scenario.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. And Jay, do you think there's any scenario we win a playoff game this year if we make it in?
Yeah, I definitely think it's possible. I mean, there's been a lot of crazy stuff to happen this year, and the Steelers, it's just about how hot you are right now. They're definitely heating up at the right time. The This is the best I think the offense has looked since maybe Big Ben was here these last 2 weeks. And if they can get a great running game going and the offense clicks now and they're scoring 30 points a game, I don't see why it can't happen.
Yeah, and that. Oh, go ahead, Braden.
I would say not everything's not exactly the same, but your guys' offense kind of in performance kind of is reminding me of the Bengals 2 years ago when Bengals offense started getting hot. They beat Kansas City, and started getting really hot, and it's kind of reminding you guys right now the offense is getting really hot. It's looking like things are finally coming together at the exact right time. And I think that would absolutely carry over into the playoffs if you guys do make it.
Yeah, and I think that's what football's about. Obviously it's really important to start off well, but it's how you finish. And the Steelers do need some help to get in the playoffs, but if they get in, I think the Steelers could beat almost any of these teams. And I know this sounds crazy, but I think the Steelers have already beat the Ravens before. I know this Ravens team is a different look, and granted there was a lot of drops by Ravens players in the game the Steelers won. However, I think for the Steelers specifically, the team that scares me the most, and it sounds crazy to say, is the Cleveland Browns because you have Joe Flacco has that veteran presence and he's playing some really solid football, especially coming from where he's come from. Not really being on a team to now being the Browns starting QB and playing better than one of the highest paid QBs in the league, and Deshaun Watson. And the Browns have handled business really well. They've been a really, really good team. They've been bad for so long. Obviously, I'm not a Browns fan by any means, but it's good to see a competitive AFC North. All four teams are just making some noise, and even on a Steelers down year, they're still competing, and still like Mike Tomlin will not have a losing season, man. 17 straight consecutive 500 or above seasons. This is a good conference, guys. Good division, excuse me.
Yeah, I'm so excited when everybody has a healthy team, and hopefully that's next year because that could be such a fun race. And there's certainly a scenario where every team in the AFC North could make the playoffs, and that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. I would love like a divisional or even like a wild card game between division rivals. Because I think every AFC North team being in would be really cool. I'm not. I don't think. I mean, I know the Colts and Texans have gotten really injured, but I think this. I mean, I know the Steelers lost to both of them, granted, but I think now the Steelers can beat both of those teams, and I think they can beat the Jags. I know the Bills, Browns, Chiefs, Dolphins, Ravens are a taller task, but I think as we sit right now, the Steelers have more talent than those AFC South teams I talked about. But again, it's not about how good you are now. It's about what have you done this season, and you already got yourself in. So the Steelers have to, win and get some help to get in. But if they do, I think they can make some noise in the playoffs.
Yep, completely agree with you. You said it's about how you finish, getting hot at the right time, and that's exactly what the Steelers have done.
Absolutely. And another part of the Steelers is people were calling for Mike Tomlin to get fired. Fans have been getting frustrated, but I'll even admit it. I think we're spoiled as fans because I haven't seen a losing season from the Steelers since I've, been alive almost, because I've seen Big Ben in the championships, the Super Bowls, and so much greatness on defense. The Steelers have had so many Hall of Fame players, a lot of class, a lot of people want to play for Mike Tomlin. And I think he just needs to get better personnel around him for coordinators. But as of right now, he's done his team right now. People were saying should be like a 5 to 6 win team, but he has them at 9-7, considering, they had Mitch in at QB. Granted, the Steelers have a really good defense, but Tomlin's played, I think, very solid for the cards he's been dealt. And I think we've seen him be more aggressive because these people have been calling him too conservative, especially that Seahawks game. He went for it on fourth down. I know the Steelers didn't get it, but just seeing how even Tomlin's changed as the season's progressed, as he's being more aggressive here in late December, early January, was awesome to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, how fans react to coaches is usually pretty funny because, coaches are kind of treated how offensive linemen and kickers are. You could be great 9 out of 10 plays, but that one time, that's what people will focus on and call for people's head on. So, yeah, I definitely, and it's kind of the same in Bengals in terms of being spoiled. Yeah, this was certainly a down year, but Zach Taylor, there's really very little to show that he should be fired. And there's a lot of overreactions when it does come to coaching. So I agree that Mike Tomlin, with the cards he's been dealt, he has done an exceptional job for the Steelers, putting them into playoff race. Even if you guys don't miss it, I still think he's done a phenomenal job this year because it's going to come down to kind of like we talked about earlier. It won't come down to him most likely. It's going to come down to factors outside of his control. And so he shouldn't be punished for that.
Absolutely. And Jay, how do you feel about Mike Tomlin now, or how have you felt about him all season?
Yeah, I feel good about him. I think obviously fans just got nervous when we had back-to-back 2-10 teams walk into our stadium and beat us. So that's a problem. But like I said, I mean, crazy things have happened in this league this year, and it happens where you just hit a rough patch in the season. I mean, we see it with the Eagles right now as well. The 49ers, they had a 3-game losing streak, I think, earlier this year.
Yeah.
So it happens in this league. You have to be able to bounce back, and they're heating up now at the right time. So
Yeah, and I think that's what makes the Steelers dangerous, you know? They're a wild if they come in as the wild card, they can be an upset team, like or they can upset some teams because they just have that chip on their shoulder like they're underdogs, and they are underdogs right now, you know, outside the playoffs. And right now, according to the NFL, the Steelers have a 63% chance to make the playoffs if they beat the Ravens, a 14% chance if they lose, and currently the Steelers sit at a 44% chance to get in. Now I know we have had no ties this year, but how crazy would it be if the Texans and Colts tie? I know it probably won't happen, but I think that would absolutely be really funny. I don't think it's gonna happen. I think it's probably less than like 1% odds, but it's just stuff like that. You know why sports are really cool because anything can happen. You know, there's a lot of wild events. Unfortunately, the Steelers have one of the most controversial refs this week. I believe it's Brad
Oh,
Allen from the Cowboys Lions game. So hopefully, you know, they're at MT&T Stadium in Baltimore this week. So hopefully, you know, he doesn't screw the Steelers over and it's a clean game of officiating. But it's tough.
he certainly, I'm not trying to be the refs control games or stuff. Well, they kind of destroyed the Cowboys Lions game literally on that
Yeah.
2 point conversion, but there does seem to be some genuine truth that the more popular team like the Ravens, like the Cowboys, seem to get some favorism when it comes to these type of games. So yeah, I can't blame you for being nervous about the refs at all.
It's tough too because, you know, I feel like I mean, him and his crew, they're not going to be officiating in the playoffs, which I think, you know, is good because you don't want them to mess up a playoff game. But at the same time, I feel like players, if the refs mess up, they should get fined. There should be some kind of, you know, call. I mean, I know refs probably in the past have gotten fined for stuff, but I feel like it needs to be more. You know, Jalen Warren got fined like $40,000 for some kind of block that didn't even look that bad, or I think it was head to head, even though it was his shoulder or something like that earlier this year. But and obviously they appealed it, but I think the refs need to be fined like that too. If you mess up so bad, and you can kind of tell it's clearly obvious, you know, someone's in bounds or someone didn't do targeting or something like that, and the refs call some, you know, bad call, they should get, you know, punished in a way financially as well because they hold a lot of weight in how games get determined sometimes.
I 100% agree, and it's just not that officiate Brad Allen's officiating crew. We've seen many different referees have a huge influence on the game on many controversial calls, and it should absolutely not be happening this as often. So yeah, I think if they started getting fines, they would stop throwing the flag as much. And yeah, I just think it's the inconsistency. You let one offense kind of allow the receiver to hand fight, but then the next offense, if the receiver used their hand, that's an offensive pass interference. So how are the players supposed to adapt to the game if the refs are calling basic controlling everything, being super inconsistent? So yeah, there needs to be a massive fixture of the officiating crew in the NFL. Admittedly, I don't know how that would look like other than starting to find them, but completely agree. There is a huge issue, and finding them would be a really great start to fixing it.
I agree. And Jay, how do you feel about, you know, Brad Allen and his officiating crew coming to Baltimore to officiate our last game?
yeah, I don't know. There was a lot of controversy about that, and I saw that, but yeah, I mean, I do agree that finding them could be good, but I feel like it'll never happen because just they're human and you expect mistakes to happen, but it's something that I would like to see. And
Yeah.
I just want to see a holding call on TJ Watt. That's what I want to see.
It's crazy too because you see, especially with Watt, like when there's holding, they're holding him like around his neck when he's trying to get like over there, and it's like obvious they don't call it, and then obviously a Steelers lineman does it, and it feels like it gets called. Now they're obviously times where the refs aren't going to get every call, but I feel like there's probably been like 10 plus times this year where Watt hasn't gotten his call. And I don't know if it's because the refs maybe aren't looking over there or whatnot, but or maybe they just don't want TJ to go in there and cause some ruckus. But this it's been a problem even like in the NBA. A side note, the LeBron 3-point shot that was called a two, where it looked like he was behind the line. And officiating, is a big part of all professional sports, but the refs have to be held accountable in a way. I think the playoff ban is really good. They're not going to be this year's playoffs officiating, but I think fines definitely do more because money's a big factor in pro sports, with betting, and paying players, paying refs, fans, all that stuff. So I think it would set the tone and make refs more consistent because you can't have where the offensive receiver gets to be like super handsy and pushing off, but then as soon as a DB does it back, then it's a foul. I think football is the best whenever there's little flags and they let players play it out. Like I like it when there's a lot of like pushing and shoving between a DB and a receiver. It sucks whenever there's very little and it just seems like the receiver gets to play most of the time unless you're an elite corner or something. I like it when they are light on the fouls and just let the players play it out, unless it's some big kind of, face mask or hold or something like that. But yeah, that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, like you said, they're humans. They're going to get a call wrong here to there. That's just part of the process, part of every game. But yeah, it's happening like 10 times a game, and that's just not okay. And I think the commissioners need to step up because as we talk about possible solutions, unless there's something going on behind the door, it seems like these refs really aren't receiving any more news conferences, at least minimal stuff in terms of how to fix it. It seems like Roger Goodell is more important on how people react to the ref versus actually fixing the ref problem.
Yeah. And that's been a thing for a while. People haven't been a fan of Roger Goodell, as a commissioner in general. Every time it's the draft, it's the yearly, every NFL fan comes together to boo the commissioner. Um, so wholesome, but yet so hateful at the same time. But, it's been tough. And especially in a league, where seasons are on the line right now for most teams, and, fans that care so much about their teams just to see it get obviously you shouldn't rely on one play to win a game, but sometimes that's what it comes down to. And, a ref having a bad call and affecting that is really frustrating because, there's a lot of talented players. And when players talk about bad officiating, they get fined, which, I mean, obviously, if players do it, then, a lot of fans will start doing it, and the NFL doesn't want that kind of look. But at the same time, I feel like players should be able to say when a call's not good, maybe not in some bad, vulgar language or anything like that, but they should be able to speak their mind sometimes. And I feel like it sucks that players can't speak as much when a call doesn't go their way without getting fined or being afraid to say what's really going on in general.
Yeah, we had that with Deontay Johnson earlier this year. He got
Yeah.
fined for after the Jaguars game. But I agree. I think it would be nice to let them speak their mind.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I went to that Jaguars game, and it was obviously frustrating to see. There was some bad calls for the Steelers that went the Steelers' way that game, and it's frustrating. But at the same time, I like the Steelers team. I think they have a lot of hope going forward, and same with your Bengals, Braden. They have Jake Browning looks really, really good, and obviously, Joe Burrow is your guys' QB, but the Bengals this season shouldn't be deemed as a bad season because there's so many teams like, I mean, obviously the Jets, lost Aaron Rodgers, paid him 75 mil for 75 seconds, but um, you look at like the Chargers who were supposed to be like playoff teams, they were called that because, Herbert's been good and stuff, but then he got hurt. Brandon Staley or Stanley, I can't remember his last name, but they haven't been as good. But you look at like again, the Bengals just had a really, really solid year considering the circumstances with Jamar Chase being in and out, with Joe Burrow being in and out, some other guys being out on that team, and people were getting frustrated with Zach Taylor from Cincinnati's end. But at the same time, I think, Zach Taylor's the reason you guys are 8-8. He has some good schemes, and Jake Browning's a solid player you guys have.
Yeah, we're one Bengals fans are one game away. We're one game away because as obviously they can't make the playoffs. But many Bengals fans were saying that yeah, if Bengals make the playoffs in these circumstances, Zach Taylor deserves Coach of the Year. I wasn't quite that far, we but yeah, we're one game away from saying yeah, Taylor did a phenomenal job. But because So yeah, Joe Burrow, those first 4 games they went 1-3. Burrow was obviously not healthy. Then he gets healthy, win 4 straight games. Then he, as we know, gets hurt in Baltimore. So yeah, there was a lot of things that went wrong. I think the fact Jake Browning performed well, we saw a very different offense after Burrow got hurt. I think that shows Taylor understood that he needed to change a bit of the offense and play up to Browning's strength. I think that's a indication of him being a good coach, unlike the Chargers in that situation, which not trying to put any negativity towards Stick. I think Staley originally and now the coaches that Staley brought in are just unable to fix that offense around him. So the Bengals still have a chance to finish over 500, which I think they may, given the Browns are playing all their backups. So yeah, I still think the Bengals showed while they did miss the playoffs, there's no reason to think they will miss it next year. They're still very talented. I think they're going to tag T. Higgins. So I think next year could truly be a year we see all AFC North teams make the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm a much bigger fan of the AFC this year. I know the NFC has some like powerhouse teams, but it just feels like as a whole the AFC has more competition, more teams that are harder to face as opposed to like 5 or 6 NFC teams and then the rest being kind of like 10 lost teams. But um I want to end off this episode, I want to ask you guys, obviously you know the Bengals aren't in, Braden, but Jay, if the Steelers don't make the playoffs, who are you rooting for to make it to the Super Bowl and win it all, whether that be an AFC or NFC team? I'll start with you, Braden, and then Jay, if you want to say if the Steelers don't make it, who you're rooting for.
The Lions are the easy answer, but I'm going to say the Cowboys. And before I get hated on, one of my best friends is a Cowboys fan, and kind of just feel bad for him. And also because I don't believe they're going to make a legitimate run.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, as a Steelers fan, I hate the Cowboys, but at the same time, CD Lamb's been ridiculous this year, and Tony Pollard as well. That offensive line, top tier as always. And Dak's had a good year too, playing at like the Mahomes. I mean, I know Mahomes has had a down year, but he's had similar stats to Patrick Mahomes this year. So, yeah. All right, how about you, Jay?
Yeah, it's kind of a basic answer, but I'm gonna go with the Lions. I mean, it'd be cool. I mean, they haven't won anything,
Yeah.
but I think most importantly, I don't want to see any of the other AFC North teams win it though.
That's how I am too. I think if I had to say for myself, I'd say the Lions. My second team's actually the Chicago Bears, but the Lions have been bad for so long that like when a team's had so like haven't won their division in like I think it was 30 or 33 years or something like that. I felt really happy for the Lions, and obviously I don't want the Browns or Ravens to win it. I also don't want the 49ers or Cowboys to win it either because just been dominant teams throughout time, or the Eagles. So I guess the Lions or Rams would be cool. I wouldn't mind seeing Miami win it all. I don't think that would happen. I don't want the Chiefs to win it all because they've been winning a lot recently. But it'd be cool, regardless. But well, guys, thank you so much for coming on this podcast, and everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is Brennan with the Steel News alongside Braden with Bengals_NFL and Jay with Steelers Loyalty. Guys, thanks for tuning in, and have a happy new year.